So, welcome, Omari.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on short notice because we didn't have this particular topic scheduled originally. And yet, when I saw that you had experience with this matter, I thought it would be a great opportunity for everyone to hear you speak about this because, it's the type of topic that no one wants to hear about. And
Agreed.
yet, and yet we do need to be aware of what is going on out there. We live in our little astrology bubble, in our cosmic bubble, and need to be aware of, the mainstream and what's going
Yes.
on in this world.
Agreed.
So I know, I assume at least that you are going to speak about, some of these very archaic laws that are probably still in place in many, in many states. And
hmm
we're mostly going to focus on the United States, but
Yes.
it's something that, I believe people need to be aware of without also panicking
Agreed.
because some of these laws have been in place since the last century,
hmm
and they have not, no one had the opportunity to update the laws in this regard except for certain places. So
hmm
mostly, it's it shouldn't be always taken so literally, and yet we need to be aware of what's going on. I will also recommend everyone to read OPA's book, The Professional Astrologer, where we have a whole chapter, chapter 6, devoted to exactly this topic, and it was written by Lisa Skyme and another AFAN fellow named, gosh, I forgot his name at this point, but I'll bring it up now, and I'll bring up the cover book. So if you don't mind, I will share the cover.
Not at all.
Um, Here it is. So this is the cover of the book. Chapter 6 basically is about the legalities and some historic cases regarding the practice of astrology. And so Omari will outline some of, the current conditions in the different states, but also give us practical guidance and speak not just about the actual laws, but about other ethical issues related to the practice.
hmm
So I'll let you speak, and I'll just stop sharing and give you back the platform.
Okay.
And if
Do I
you
have to
could,
reshare the slides again? Do I have to
yeah,
go through that? Okay, I gotta go through those steps again. Okay, great. Give me
and if
just a
you
moment.
could, introduce yourself. We
I
talked
would.
before the recording that you are the president of Friends of Astrology in Chicago.
Yes. Okay.
So
So good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's lecture. I am Omari Martin, and I am the president of the Friends of Astrology, based in Chicago, Illinois. The Friends of Astrology has been in existence since 1938, and on Saturday, November 3rd, we will be celebrating our 80th anniversary with Georgia Stathis, who will be here with us for a one-day seminar, and of course, all of you are invited. And in addition to that, I am a professional member of the American Federation of Astrologers. I am also the chair of the board of Kepler College, and I also serve as the treasurer for the Astrology News Service. And that's in addition to working with clients and students of astrology, in addition to being a college professor and a doctoral student at this time.
wonderful.
So give me to share, and there it is. That's it. Okay, great. So welcome to Legality and Ethics for Professional Astrologers. This is one of the pre-conference webinars, and that's just my name and some honorifics. And at this time, I want to share that I am not an attorney. What I'm sharing with you this evening is born out of my own experience of developing an astrology practice, with moving forward with obtaining a home-based business license and things of that nature. So this here is essentially the agenda. Legality of astrology. So I'll touch bases on some laws and ordinances, two court cases in particular, one more formal than the other. We'll also talk about liability, and we'll transition into a discussion about the ethics of astrology, touching on professional examinations offered by 4 astrology organizations, and we'll also have a brief discussion about counseling and therapy and how we can distinguish ourselves from professional counselors and psychotherapists. Okay, so now I want to share a PDF with you. Give me just a moment. And Maurice, I want to share a PDF. So do I just stop this share?
Yes, you can basically go back to new share, and it's not on your PowerPoint, it's a different file.
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
So do a new share and select the PDF.
Okay, you got it. Okay, so here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Is this text large enough for us?
Yes.
Okay, great. So here we have an ordinance from the city of Chicago. As you can see, it was originally passed on August 30th of 1939, 79 years ago, and it was amended, 49 years ago. And I just want to touch on some of the highlights. And so here, in the second paragraph, where it says, no person shall obtain money or property from another by fraudulent devices and practices in the name of or by means of spirit mediumship, palmistry, card reading, astrology, seership, or like crafty science or fortune telling of any kind. And so I wanted to highlight that particular paragraph because this is essentially the language that you would find in most municipalities that may have ordinances or laws on the books against astrology. And as you can clearly see, astrology is lumped in with everything else. We see here, spirit mediumship, palmistry, card reading, and the others as well. Also here, it makes a reference to a fine not less than $25, but of course, this is dated and not more than $100 for each offense. Now, this particular ordinance also goes into some details about advertising psychic or magical powers. And again, if you look closely in this paragraph, again, no person shall advertise by display, sign, circular handbill, or in any newspaper, periodical, magazine, or other publication. And then it goes right into to tell fortunes or reveal the future, or by means of occult or psychic power, faculties, or forces. And there we have it, clairvoyance, psychology, psychometry, spirits, mediumship, seership, prophecy, astrology, palmistry, necromancy, or light crafty science. And then they add cards, talismans, charms, potions, magnetisms, magnetized articles or substances. So they've thrown in everything except a kitchen sink just to make sure that people don't, quote unquote, do this. And this obviously is what has contributed to the negative perception of astrology. However, I personally question that they have psychology in there because that's normal these days. Okay, so that is the ordinance for the city of Chicago. Now, I'd like to give some attention to what we have for the state of Illinois, and give me a moment just to rotate this. Now, this document is older and a little fuzzier. Nevertheless, it is essentially the same in nature. I can also share with you, if you look closely, and I've already read it to you, so you don't need me to read it to you again, it's the exact same language where it talks about fortune telling by means of card reading, palmistry,
So
clairvoyance, astrology.
just
Yes.
to clarify, Omari, this is in the state of Illinois,
Yes, this is in the state of Illinois.
and it's
And
still in effect.
yes, sir. Technically, fortune telling, which does include astrology, is illegal in the state of Illinois. However, it is one of those laws on the books that's been on the books for a long time. And as you can see, this was filed on June 26th of 1917, over 100 years ago. Well, I'll say about 100 years ago. And so it's on the books, but it's not enforced, in this day and age.
Hmm.
Now, I want to refer to, and I'll show that in just a moment, a court case that is mentioned by an individual, a gentleman who lived in Florida, and then I will share a court case that was published on the AFAN website by a gentleman, and some of you may recognize his name. And I want to go back to this court case. Give me just a moment. I want to just rotate this. I want to rotate this clockwise. Okay. And I just want to scroll up. And so here we have a gentleman who obviously was an astrologer, and he claims or says that he's the only licensed astrologer in Miami, Florida. And in this first paragraph, he just talks about the requirements and the all of the dog and pony show and fiery hula hoops he had to go through in order to obtain an occupational license as a professional astrologer. So here in the first paragraph, he talks about he was first required to rent an office, submit to a rigid investigation of his background, training, and personal life. He had to provide 5 character references who were also investigated. He had to be fingerprinted twice, photographed 3 times by various agencies. He had to establish proof of voter registration and 2 years of residency in the city. And he makes his point that none of that was required for any other type of occupational license. And so he also, in the second paragraph, makes a reference to the fees. And so he was permitted to pay $150 to the county and a little over $1,300 to the city for permission to practice astrology, where all other occupational license fees were under $50. And so he moved forward with a lawsuit to really highlight how astrology, as he puts it, is so blatantly discriminated against. And so, of course, this is from some years ago by Mr. Arthur Drinkwater in Coconut Grove, Florida. And he also was ever so kind to provide his birth data to us as astrologers. And you'll see that there, August 26, 1948, 12:42 p.m. in Dallas, Texas. And so, again, this here is his claim to, file that lawsuit in order to fight the blatant discrimination against astrology. Now, I also want to share a little bit more about the city of Chicago, and this is the case for many cities or even counties where you are able to obtain what is called a home-based business license. So if it's a home-based business, you don't have to rent office space or anything like that. And I just want to highlight, okay, there it is, where it talks about you cannot focus on astrology, card reading, palm reading, or fortune telling in any form. So even if it's a home-based business, technically there's an ordinance against astrology. Now, I want to share with you that I was able to successfully obtain a home-based business license. So when I went downtown to just follow the procedures. I completed an application, and the original application stated that my business was about providing astrology, numerology, and graphology services. And I submitted the application, and it was reviewed by the young lady who also served as the receptionist. And I was seated for about 10 minutes. And then she looked at me, and I looked at her, and she looked over her shoulder, and she looked back at me, and she motioned for me to come to her. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I got up from my seat. I went over to the counter, and she, in a low voice, let me know that they never approve applications that included the word astrology, numerology, or anything like that. I
Wow.
was like, really? She said, yeah. And that's when I found out that astrology was against the law. And this page that we're looking at right now was a page that she gave me to show me that it was actually against the law. So now I want to share with you how I chose to relanguage the purpose of my business in an effort to get the application for a home-based business license approved. And so here it is right here. So as you can see, I originally wrote astrology, numerology, graphology services, plus training and education. So when the young lady told me it would never be approved listing those activities, I completed a new application and simply wrote human personality and behavior analysis. And with that, I was interviewed by another person, and my application was approved. So, my suggestion for those who would hear this or review the archive of today's presentation, consider using different language, such as human personality and behavior analysis, because that's really what we are using astrology for. And this places less emphasis on the tool because astrology is a tool, as well as numerology and graphology. They're all tools, but we are using those tools to do what? Engage in human personality and behavior analysis. And that may be, I believe, in some instances, a strategic approach in an effort to obtain a home based business license when you have to describe the activities of your business.
So I have a question for you,
Yes.
Omari. First of all, how can people in each state find out, if it's legal or not? I applied in Arizona for a business license as an astrologer, and I listed,
Mhm.
the term astrology, and it was approved without any problem.
Mhm.
So where can people find out? Should they just go to the city hall and ask, or?
Well, in this day and age, because of the internet, you may not have to take that trip to City Hall or to the village hall. You may be able to find that information on the internet through Google Scholar. And
Mhm.
depending on your research skills will determine how much you find. And if you're not able to find what you're looking for on your own through researching it online, well, the next step is to simply pick up the phone and give them a call and simply ask.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So next, I'd like to share this. So this here is from AFAN, The Law and Astrology, and it was written by Jade Jacobs. I believe some of you may know his name. I have never met this particular colleague. I am simply familiar with his name. And so this is about a court case in California. And is this text large enough for everyone?
Yeah,
Is
it's fine.
this okay, great. So so just right about in the center, the California Supreme Court overturned as unconstitutional infringement of free speech and Azusa, California ordinance that completely banned fortune telling, a spiritual psychic science church of truth, Okay, that's the specific case. And the court held that astrologers and fortune tellers have the same constitutionally protected right to express and charge for their opinions as other mainstream forecasters. Now, one example of other mainstream forecasters would be weather forecasters. Weather forecasters predict the weather, and we know they are not always right. Let's see.
I believe, the chapter we have in the OPA book that I was mentioning at the beginning
Yes.
speaks exactly about that case where they they sued an astrologer for practicing fortune telling, and his defense was that if people are allowed to predict the weather, why using speculation and techniques,
Mm-hmm.
why why are astrologers restricted? And he basically won the case.
Mm-hmm.
So that, the weather channel is our reference basically.
And they're 24/7. Okay, so let's look at this at a high level a little more closely. And so, as we can see, as it states here, fortune telling ordinances usually include astrology. And that is the case in many municipalities, or if not all of them, that have a law or ordinance on the books that addresses fortune telling. In addition, I want to just highlight how in the state of California, it says it is important to note that the Uniform Criminal Code does not criminalize astrology. And as we know, there are no federal statutes that restrict astrology. So at the federal level, it's a non-issue.
Okay, good
This
to know.
is this is something that is an issue from state to state, city to city, village to village, county to county, depending on how your area is set up. So here in the state of Illinois, we have the state of Illinois, the county of Cook, the city of Chicago. So there are three different layers. And to my knowledge, the county doesn't have anything on the books that addresses fortune telling at all. But as I showed you earlier, the city of Chicago does, and so does the state of Illinois. Now, just to wrap this up, I want to just share with you the court's conclusion. And so, in summation, the California Supreme Court in Azusa stated that the state statute prohibiting fraudulent fortune telling was valid and sufficient to protect the public interest. Thus, there are methods to prevent fraudulent fortune telling that would impose less drastic restriction and protected speech. And marginal interests in the city may have in a more complete and convenient regulation in this area by a total ban of fortune telling for compensation is outweighed by the interest in free and open speech on all subjects. So, what cities can and cannot do? It states here that no city in California can ban astrology or the related and unrelated metaphysical practices with which it was previously outlawed.
So we can all move to California.
California is always ahead of the curve on many things, organic food, you name it.
So do you know if other states have done the same?
I do not. I am in the process of revisiting. So I, I was sharing with Maurice the other day, ladies and gentlemen, that when I first started, my one of my original goals was to do this for all 50 states, to find out if there was a if astrology was against the law at the state level and in some of the major cities. And then I was younger then, and then I discovered that AFAN existed, the Association for Astrological Networking. And in reading their website, I learned that their purpose was to focus more on the legal aspects or legal concerns of astrology. So I, did not pursue that particular goal. But after today, it's something I may revisit at a future date to provide a more comprehensive list for the community so that we know how to navigate that and we can be proactive.
Very good.
Okay, so now I'd like to switch back to this and move forward and talk a little bit about liability. And I think as astrologers, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, we should take a risk management approach. And you may want to consider developing a client questionnaire, not much different from when someone may go visit a doctor's office or even when someone may go to visit an attorney. And there is a client questionnaire that's in place to gauge, if you will, what does the client really need? What's going on with the client? What's going on with the patient? One question, depending on your degree and level of comfort, you may want to ask directly or indirectly, but preferably directly, is the client currently experiencing depression? And that doesn't mean that you should not work with that client. It just means you now have an awareness of what you may be working with, and it may be best to, in some meaningful and appropriate way, modify how you approach consulting that particular client. The last thing that any of us would want to do would be to ask questions or start down a line of questioning or inquiry that triggers certain thoughts and emotions with the client that they, you know, act out after the consultation and blah, 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 blah. So we don't want that. Now, at the same time, where we have a client questionnaire, you may want to consider a client release and disclaimer form as well. So let's see. I'd like to share a client release and disclaimer form. So bear with me while I share that with you. And where is it? 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 Okay, here it is. Okay, can you all see my screen?
No, we can't.
You cannot. You cannot.
We
Okay,
can
let's
see
see.
your face.
You can see my face. Okay, hold on, hold on, hold on. Um, oh, here it is. Here it is. Here it is. There we go. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a client release and disclaimer form, that I have. Sorry about that. Okay, there we go. That I have. And I just want to touch on the three sections that are in boldface print. So it says, I hereby request you to inform me concerning the planetary forces active. I think that's as of or on the date of my birth and at other times during my life, the dates of which I will give you. I affirm that these are the true dates and times to the best of my knowledge. Then the second one that I have in boldface print is this. I understand that I am not asking you to tell my future in any sense, and understand that you do not attempt or pretend to do so. And the third bullet point that I have in boldface print is that I understand and accept that all information provided and advice given is not intended to take the place of the same delivered from other professionals, such as medical doctors, accountants, attorneys, financial advisors, psychiatrists, or psychotherapists. So here, with the client's printed name, signature, and date, and a fingerprint, this is my way of mitigating risk so that the client is crystal clear about what to expect as well as what not to expect from me as a professional astrologer.
Great. And
Let's,
that is something we can have on our website under, let's say, our consultation page.
yes.
This can be listed, in very, very fine print or, or not.
Or not. Yes, agreed.
And it can also be emailed along, with a booking form. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so, we can choose to do it in different ways, but it's always good
Yes.
to have a disclaimer and to basically, let people know that we are not, to set expectations right, as you were mentioning.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that's important for us as professional astrologers, and it's equally important for the client as well. Okay, so now I want to transition into professional ethics, or the ethics of astrology in professional examinations. So I just want to state once again publicly that I am pro certification for astrologers. Yes, and there are four organizations that offer exams. I'm sure all of you may be familiar with these four organizations, and they are listed in chronological order. The American Federation of Astrologers offers
We
three
don't,
exams.
we
Oh,
don't see a slide.
oh, you don't see the slides?
We're
Okay,
still on the disclaimer.
okay, okay. There we go. How's that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for letting me know that. So here, ladies and gentlemen, just want to transition into the ethics of astrology and talk a little bit about the professional exams. And again, I am pro certification for astrologers, and these four organizations are listed in the order of their founding. And the American Federation of Astrologers offers three exams: a student exam, professional exam, and they also offer a teacher exam. Each exam is 8 hours in duration, and their examination is very practical, and it boils down to either you know it or you don't. So you have to calculate a birth chart north or south of the equator and from any time zone, east or west of the prime meridian. And yeah, it's a comprehensive exam. With the National Council of Geocosmic Research, Professional Astrologers Alliance, as most of us know, if not all of us, they have 4 levels of certification. And the first 3 levels are proctored. Level 4, you can choose one of 4 majors, and they actually mail that to you, and it's something you have to work on like a project. I will also add that NCGR has an equivalency program. So if you are a professional member of the American Federation of Astrologers, you can start at level 3 with NCGR. AFA also offers practice examinations for those who have an interest in their examination program. NCGR, PAA, they sell a book that focuses on their examination program. We also, oh, and with NCGR PAA, their examination has an academic orientation. So I remember when I took that exam, there was some matching, multiple choice, and I'm the type, if I've studied and you put the answer in front of me, I should probably be able to figure it out. But with AFA, they don't do that. We also have the International Society for Astrological Research, and their examination program has 4 categories or areas: consulting skills, ethics awareness course, and a test. So, this particular organization, there is an ethics test that you have to take and pass. There's also a competency exam, and there are 3 electives that you have to take. And of course, you can read more about that at their website. And let's see. And then we also have OPA, the Organization for Professional Astrology, the organization that is hosting this pre-conference webinar. And I want to highlight that OPA's examination program, ladies and gentlemen, is qualitative in nature. It is not quantitative. So with the other 3 organizations, you have to demonstrate that you can do spherical trigonometric functions. And while I did pass 3 of those exams, I don't think everybody is wired for that. And that doesn't mean that someone cannot become or is not a good astrologer. And so OPA has a different approach to certification, which is qualitative in nature. and they have a 3 peer group process. So you have an opportunity to participate in 3 different peer group processes to learn and grow with a group of your peers. In addition to that, they have an integrative consulting skills component, which is important. And ISAR also has that consulting skills component. And let's see, I think an OPA will grandfather in the consulting skills component from ISAR into their own certification program. And then OPA offers the astronomy for astrologers. And so it is equally important, ladies and gentlemen, that we understand the dynamics of a chart. We have to understand that when we're looking at that piece of paper like this, it's a flat piece of paper, but the solar system is 3 dimensional. And when you're looking at that flat piece of paper, we don't get to see declination. And that's the 3rd dimension. So they offer astronomy for astrologers, and the opportunity, if you have registered for part 2 of the conference, that can lead to certification with OPA. And I certainly want to open it up for the president of OPA to fill in any of the gaps that I've shared with you about OPA certification programs. So Maurice, would you fill in those gaps if there are any?
Well, like you said, we are moving now in a time where certification becomes more and more important. Up to, the past few years, people could rely on this being self-taught and moving from teacher to teacher, or, basically gathering the body of knowledge from diverse sources and books. But we get to the point where we understand that if we want to advance our professions, we do need more rigorous standards. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's not only for our image, it is really to go deeper into the way we practice, and the fact that we can not only learn astrology but receive feedback.
Yes.
Whether it's through OPA, we work through peer groups, and so we see each other's analyzed chart. We talk about the way we manage our business, and we speak about what happens in a consulting room. And these are things you can't do on your own. You do need you
Mm-hmm.
know a body. And then, like you say, you also have the organization who provide actual training and testing of actual child analysis and techniques, which the good thing is that they are usually comprehensive. They include different schools of astrology, and it's important today to have really that validation, not so much for the piece of paper, but first of all for your own feeling that someone actually approves and
Mm-hmm.
knows that you know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I will also add that, as OPA does this, as you say, it's a qualitative um, evaluation. We don't teach astrology in this particular format, but we see anyone who's coming from any background. We want to evaluate if you know what you're doing. So we don't care about what technique, as long as it works, and how you deliver it. So we pay attention not only to how you present and read a chart, but also how you communicate it. And as you mentioned, the astronomy is extremely important, and it's the step forward. Astrologers have been separated from astronomy for too many years,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and we should not be intimidated, because we're not going to study rocket science. We're not going to get into extremely difficult and detailed analysis. It's really about understanding the general concept of astronomy and know some really fundamental terms that will actually improve also our way of practice.
Mm-hmm.
I'll
Mm-hmm.
just add another note that there are also private trainings that are not part of the organizations that may be also valid. This is, you do your own research, and you can see if some teachers are, teaching specific techniques that go more in depth with a certain orientation. If you feel that these organizations don't go deep enough with the traditional or with the modern or with the Vedic, you can go to specific schools who, will further elaborate and expand on more particular orientations.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, Omari, for bringing this up. And we definitely, as OPA, we definitely want to encourage people to take that more seriously.
Okay. You're welcome, Maurice, and thank you for adding that in and supplementing that information for me. To continue or to just add to it, so ladies and gentlemen, I would also share with you that peer review is not exclusive to astrologers. So in academia, those who, after earning a doctoral degree or a master's degree, if they want to be published in one of the scholarly journals, their article must go through a peer review process. And some journals have a double blind peer review, and I have heard some even have a triple blind review process in order for that article to make it to publication. And so their peers are simply providing feedback in order to make that article or the research in that article stronger, more effective, and more of a contribution to that particular academic discipline. So peer review is real. And I also want to add that all four organizations, the American Federation of Astrologers, NCGR Professional Astrologers Alliance, the International Society for Astrological Research, and the Organization for Professional Astrology, all four organizations have a code of ethics that you subscribe to by virtue of being a member. And I would invite you to, if you are a current member of any of these organizations, to take a look at and simply review the code of ethics. I've even made it a point to read the code of ethics for AFA and NCGR PAA. And one of the things that I found is that the code of ethics for NCGR PAA is much, much longer and comprehensive than the code of ethics of AFA. Now, that doesn't mean that it's better than or less than, but I'm definitely saying that it is more comprehensive. And ESAR, they focus on that so much so that you take a course and you have to pass a test. Let's see. And again, when we talk about a code of ethics, that's not exclusive to these four organizations listed on the slide. That exists for attorneys, medical doctors, accountants,
Yeah,
psychotherapists,
of course.
financial analysts, investment professionals. A code of ethics exists in every profession. And as we seek to enhance and improve the image of professional astrology, it only helps for us to do the same.
So I will ask you another question. And there's also another question that came up from Elizabeth that was referring to having a website online. Let's say you are in Chicago, but you have your website on astrology online.
Mm-hmm.
I assume that as far as the laws goes, it's again a state by state issue. It's not related to the internet or outside the internet. It's just where is your base? Where is your business registered?
Yeah, where's your base? Where is the business physically located? What is the business address? So it's based on that. Yes.
So
Mm-hmm.
the next question about the ethics.
Yes.
We emphasize that in the peer group. There's a whole section on ethics. All the organizations have many chapters that detail that. You can go to OPA's website. It's also listed there. But now my question to you, if you have any more to add to that. Let's say, an astrologer acted unethically, violated boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
cause some kind of damage to the client.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as far as laws, do you know anything about that? If you know, if the client, what kind of leverage do they have? And then my next question is there an insurance for our practice?
Okay, great. So, in terms of the leverage that a client would have if the astrologer broke the law, that would certainly fall under the general laws of that city, that county, and that state. And the professional astrologer is still expected to be a law abiding citizen, especially in those jurisdictions where astrology is not against the law. So you're still subject to all the laws, no matter what they may be in that particular jurisdiction. And the client would have leverage based on a violation of law, possibly, and I'm clearly speculating here, some form of negligence, if you will, because there is inherent in the consultation, inherent in that for the professional astrologer is a standard of care. It's inherent due to the nature of the work we do. It's along the lines or akin to a standard of care that a patient should expect when going to a doctor's office.
So do no harm.
Yes, so do no harm.
And and yet, we know, I know, through OPA that and my general exposure that you have some astrologers that are going to tell their clients that they're going to die on a certain day or that their spouse is going to die on a certain day.
Which is unethical. It's a no-no, and I
It's
do
a
have a.
no-no but
Mhm.
what I'm saying, it's a no-no in our code of ethics, and I think all the
Yes,
organization agree on that. And
yes.
yet it's, on a legal level, is the client, will can they sue? And then the other question, I don't know, like you say, you're not an attorney, so you may not have all these answers. And the other question is, in case we are straying in that position, I'm not talking about sexual violations, which are obviously immediately
Hmm.
reprimanded and condemned. But I'm talking about the gray lines where astrology is very specific, because a psychologist will never tell that to their client, a
Correct.
lawyer will never. It's really something that's exclusive to our field.
Hmm. Correct. So, so with that, so to begin to address that, Maurice, and thank you, because that's a very good point. So, ladies and gentlemen, rule of thumb, we should never predict death. However, in the event that someone did that, the question becomes on behalf of the client, was that session recorded? And does the client have a copy of that recording? And how did the client use that information or respond to that information? Hypothetically speaking, and bear with me, I do have a tendency to provide extreme examples. So the astrologer tells the client such and such a date, such and such a week, it's very likely that you're going to die. In response to that, the stress and anxiety level of the client shoots through the roof. And this client, no, I don't want to die from that disease. I don't want to die like that. And then this particular client commits suicide. The surviving spouse finds this recorded consultation from the professional astrologer. I would say 100% of the time, the lawsuit is coming.
Mhm.
The lawsuit is coming.
So
The
this highlights, sorry for interrupting, but
It's
this
okay.
highlights our need to adhere to ethical standard and to be educated,
Yes.
because we may not be aware of the things we do, because
Mhm.
we're so focused on our little charts and our measurements, and we forget there's a human in front of us. So that's
Yes,
the
yes,
very, the importance of all these programs is to know those gray lines. And we're using these extreme examples, but there are less extreme,
yes.
which
That could have
are,
the same outcome of a lawsuit.
so the other thing, I personally would recommend a recording for the other reason that sometimes a client, I know for myself, a client will say, well, you told me that this would happen on that day and that day, and it didn't. And I know this is not my language. I know I would never say such a thing. And I
Mm-hmm,
tell them,
mm-hmm,
have you listened to the recording, and did you really hear me say that? So the recording can
mm.
actually be your protection. If you act
Yes,
ethically, it will
exactly. Yes,
it will cover for any kind of misunderstanding or projection
yes. Mm-hmm.
or people coming with their own paranoia.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, exactly. And so I'd also like to transition to the last part of this, counseling and therapy. So through the years, I have seen some of our colleagues refer to themselves as astrological counselors. And that bothered me because I questioned in my own way, did this individual really possess the academic training and development and professional licensing to refer to themselves as a counselor in the legal context? And when you talk about therapy, and we certainly want to stay away from that unless one does have a master's degree, MSW, a master's of social work, or a master's of science, and one is in turn a licensed social worker, meaning you've taken that exam and you have chosen a career to become a psychotherapist. There's also one can become a licensed professional counselor, LPC, and the requirements for that varies from state to state. However, with a master's degree in counseling, a master's of science in counseling, and an licensed professional, a licensing as a professional counselor, you could refer to yourself as that because you would have the academic training and development, and you've taken, an exam to get the license, and you could do that. Um, when we talk about training and development, the closest that I personally have come to that has been transformational training, akin to life coaching or training for that. However, that's still not counseling and that's still not therapy. It's not. But just want to highlight that. I've also seen transformational astrologer, and I'm like, what is that? Of course, didn't address that to the individual, but I'm really scratching my head. And again, when we talk about ethics, we want to seriously consider that just to keep ourselves off the radar in a bad way. Because once we're on the radar in a bad way, the missiles are coming. And again, we want to refrain from predicting death. So that essentially concludes what I wanted to share with the
So
audience this evening. But I want to go back to the insurance question because I didn't answer that. Now,
just one
oh,
note before
yes.
the insurance to refer to
Yes.
this very specific note.
Yes.
So we we discourage people to use the word counselor because it's a very charged word legally.
Yes.
But you can be a consultant, and that
Yes.
covers it. So if you are an astrology consultant, there is no legal ties or academic ties to that
Correct.
title, and you
Mm-hmm.
can use it more freely. But if
Yes.
you want to use counselor, you do need to back that up with a degree.
And a license by virtue of passing an examination. And so even I refer to myself as a human personality and behavior analysis consultant. And that is the language I use in reference to myself as a certified professional astrologer.
Great.
Hmm.
So that
Thank you,
clears.
Maurice. Great point. Yes. And consultant, well, again, it's not legally charged, and we have more freedom to use that word. Now, to go back and touch on insurance. So I literally received a couple of days ago my new homeowner's insurance policy, and I actually have the option to pick up business insurance. And if you do have a home-based business license, the business insurance is if you have clients coming to your home. So in some municipalities, you can't have visitors come to your home or clients come to your home. They can only come during certain hours, 9 to 5, regular business hours. You may not be able to put a sign on the front door in the front window open. You may not be able to do that in the municipality. And the insurance is really for if the client is physically injured on the property. That's homeowners, but the business insurance should be considered. And I would, depending on the size of your practice, you should consider it.
So
Definitely.
the homeowner insurance is only
It's for the home.
if
And
someone
then,
gets hurt, if someone
yes,
trips and things.
exactly. Trips and falls up and down the steps or in the home. Then there's business insurance. And I saw that my insurance company wants to offer that to me, but I haven't read the specific policy. Now, the other thing is this: if astrology is illegal in that particular municipality, the insurance would be null and void.
Yeah.
That's how that goes. However, for example, in the state of California, where it's legal to do that, and also where you are, Maurice, in Arizona, where astrology is legal, and you have business insurance to address just in case a client wants to sue you based on the consultation, blah, 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 blah. And you would then have that, I'm going to just say $1 million policy in place to protect yourself, where you shift that risk to the insurer. But again, that only counts if astrology is not illegal in your municipality at the state level, county level, city level, or village level, or town level.
Thank you. That's a good point. And I will share, personally, this is a question that has come up between colleagues quite often. And I will say most astrologers choose not to have insurance
Mm-hmm.
because, you know, um, it adds obviously to the expenses, but the likelihood of being sued is really minimal. But if you
At this
feel,
time.
yeah, at this time, and in because most of our clients are also people who are, and that's again depending on who your target audience is.
Mm-hmm.
If your network is really completely open and indiscriminate versus a pool of client that people that are more, in your line of work,
Mm-hmm.
it may be, really far-fetched for you to be sued. And I'm not saying impossible, but
Correct.
it, but on the other hand, if you want to be safe, and if you feel that this is something that that will help you do your work more at ease and more at peace, then
Mm-hmm.
options exist.
Agreed.
And
I would, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
it's just that astrology is always in a gray area, just as we look at these laws that are not enforced if they exist, and in most cases are not really, even you read it yourself. Some of these laws even include ban psychology, which is obviously completely irrelevant to our time. So what I'm saying is, pay attention, but don't panic, because many of us are doing astrology for many years, and we help tremendous amount of people. What
Mm-hmm.
I would put the most emphasis at this point is to just be aware of what the laws are in your area, so that you know, at least you're informed and you know how to navigate that. But the other thing is to really put more emphasis on your own ethical procedures and practice, so that you don't get in trouble in the first place, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, you don't abuse your clients, and you don't predict death, and you don't, you know, traumatize anyone that comes and seek your services.
Agreed, agreed. And I would also add, for my colleagues who are here in real time and those who may review the archive, when you are contacted by a prospective new client, make the conscious choice to hire the client or not. Make that a conscious choice. I'm sure all of us have heard people refer to the quote unquote gut instinct. Listen to it. And if your gut instinct is just uneasy and you're just not clear or sure based on that whether or not you should hire that client, say that from the space of compassion and with diplomacy. Be willing to maybe refer that client to a different astrologer or another type of professional. And it's okay. It could be where there's a point in your practice where the time has come to de-hire a client. That's okay too. It can happen. Um,
Sure.
and I think that falls within the domain of being an ethical professional astrologer. So thank you, Maurice. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Omari. This was really important. You know, it's kind of these honest discussions that are not always comfortable, and yet
Hmm.
we need to address those issues if we want to move forward.
Hmm.
So I recommend, you know, everyone to do that homework and to review those ethical guidelines that are usually posted on these organizations' websites, and
Hmm.
to, if you want, you know, if you feel safer, if you want to seek the, you know, the services of an insurance company, just look around, and I'm sure there are some services available. So with that, understand that astrologers have been, and excuse me, one more thing, I want to also highlight the disclaimer that we should all be using, because that's also a very effective and inexpensive protection that already sets the tone for what the client is coming for. So a disclaimer that basically highlights what you do, what you do not do.
Hmm.
And you know, one thing I will say for myself, for example, when I do elections, when people want to find a date for a surgery or for a purchase, I will say, you know, I will do this work for you. I will find the auspicious date based on astrology, but I do not guarantee that this date will be without fail and that you'll never have problems. So
Hmm.
things like that, even if they are obvious to you, they need to be obvious to your client.
Agreed. Hmm.
And the one of the disclaimers is to always say that, you know, we offer, and I'm going to provide support and perspective based on your astrology chart, but you need to make a decision about your life. The reading is not um, forcing you into any decision. You
Hmm.
have to do your own research and come to your own conclusions about the decisions of your life. So things like that help you and the client realize that they, you know, every side needs to take responsibility for what they do.
Hmm.
So thank you once again, and
You're
we'll meet
welcome. Thank you.
next week in Tucson.
Yes, I will be there next week. I'm looking forward to Tucson, Arizona.
Thank
Bye
you,
bye,
everyone.
everyone. Take care. Oh, were there any questions? Did we answer all the questions in the chat pod?
So far, so good.
So far, so good. Okay. Everyone, thank you for your time and attention this evening. I look forward to meeting you next week if you're at the I-Astrologer conference. And if not, maybe I'll see you next year at one of the other conferences. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.